Let's have a look at how to create proxy files inside Premiere Pro. Proxy files are smaller files than the original files, but are very useful for editing efficiently, particularly with ultra high definition footage, and also if you're doing multiple split screens or multicam. I'll just demonstrate on this still image here. This is a 4K image, ultra high definition resolution, and if I wanted to make a proxy would effectively be a much smaller version of it. It would be smaller in size. It would also be smaller by being compressed more severely. So the quality will reduce, the file size will dramatically reduce, but it means playing back will be much smoother. So if you have an older machine and it can't quite play back your ultra high definition footage, or if you're working with raw ultra high definition footage, or like I said, if you're working with multicam or an edit with multiple clips of HD or Ultra HD video and your machine isn't coping, making proxies is the way forward. So let's go and have a look inside Premiere how to work with these. So I'm going to make myself a new project. I'm going to call it Making Proxies. And when we go to the ingest settings, we have a variety of different options of how we can ingest the footage. The first option is copy, which means we're literally going to make a copy of the media. That's useful if we're bringing it in from a camera or a camera card. The second option is transcode, which means it's effectively going to copy it but convert it to all one type. So often you might transcode all to ProRes because it would make it all one format. If you've got media coming from multiple different cameras and formats, it can create problems when you're editing, particularly with bigger projects. So transcoding is the traditional method of making it all one format, a stable format for editing. And then you've got the third option, which is creating proxies. If I click create proxies, you can see I've got a multiple selection of presets. I've got H.264 presets, which is going to give me an MP4. I've got ProRes, I've got Cineform, I've got DNX. I've got different formats of proxy files I can make, as well as different resolutions. Most of these come in 3 flavors: low, medium, and high. So if you want the file size to be as small as possible, H.264, giving us an MP4, is going to be the smallest, most compressed file. It's also using the lower resolution option. So this is going to give us the smallest file. Of course, there could be cases when you want the resolution still to be quite high, but the file size to be small, or you want to use a more stable format like a ProRes or a Cineform to edit with. But I'm going to go with this option because it'll give us the most dramatic comparison. I'm going to select that. I do want to choose where the proxies go. Usually it will say same as project, which can be a bit messy. So I'll say choose location. But if you're working with particularly small files like H.264, you can also save the proxies directly to the cloud. And that's a really interesting way of working remotely. We'll look at that in another tutorial. I'm going to go choose location, and I'm going to just go to my desktop. I've got my HD footage. I'll just pop it in a new folder called Proxies. Hit create, hit choose, hit OK, and we're inside of Premiere Pro. So I'm in the assembly workspace here. I'm going to go and import some media, and I'm going to go down and select a bunch of these clips, maybe 5 or 6 ultra high definition clips. Now when I import them, it doesn't appear like anything unusual happens, and I can go and take them and start editing with them straight away. But something is happening in the background where here you can see Adobe Media Encoder is actually already launched, and it's chugging through making these proxies in the background. You don't have to do it. It's making these proxy files of the originals in the background. So I'm going to quickly make a new sequence from the clips here. And you can see there on the timeline. Now my playback might not be very smooth because this is ultra high definition footage. But in a few moments, the media encoder is going to finish making the proxies. It does it in the background. So if you're playing back your timeline in Premiere, it will pause at media encoder. When you stop your playback, if you're just navigating and moving things around, it will continue. So it's sharing the processor and the computer's hardware. When the proxy creation has completed, you won't get any particular warning. It's just that you'll be aware that media encoder is finished. I can go and enable the proxies, and that's easy to do. At the moment, my timeline, my project is looking at the original media. If I go down to my button editor over here, I have a selection of other buttons I can add. And this button here is toggle proxies. This is the one I want. So if I click it, if I drag it, if I drop it there, if I hit OK, now I've added toggle proxies. Now let me go to one that's particularly sharp. So these baboons. And if I press this button, I'm now viewing the proxies. If I'm pressing this button again, I'm viewing the original media. Now on your screen, as I toggle between the two, you probably can't tell much difference, if any difference. I'm going to just set this to 100%, so I'm seeing it pixel for pixel, and I toggle between the proxies and back to the original. You might notice there's a slight softness on the proxies. Probably if I go in something like 400% and just go and navigate on something really sharp like this guy's eyes and his hair, this is using the proxy and this is using the original. You can see the original's got a lot more detail. The proxy is softer, it's lower resolution, it's got more compression on it. So when I want to work with the proxies, I just have the proxy button enabled. It's blue when it's enabled. When I want to work with the original, so perhaps if I want to do some color correction on a few frames, I may go back to the uncompressed original media. When I come to export, I want to have my original media being relinked. You don't have to unlink and relink. You just press this button, toggles on and off the proxies. If I have my original media on, if I go up to this clip here, if I right mouse button click, I can go down and choose to reveal in Finder. That's going to just open my Finder window and it will show me my original media there was 1.16 gig. If I enable the proxy, now it's looking at the proxy. If I right mouse button click and also go down to reveal in Finder, it's now going to say there's my proxy. So my original media was 1.16 gig. My proxy version is 29 megabytes. That's a significant amount smaller, both in file size and in data that's being used. So I'm going to have a much more fluid editing experience when I'm working in Premiere using proxies. You can do it on HD video if your machine is older, particularly useful, like I said, if you're dealing with multiple streams of HD or Ultra HD, and even VR 360 when you're dealing with 6 or 8K images. The proxy workflow is a beautiful system. So that's how to create and enable proxies inside of Premiere Pro.